Welcome to the Undergraduate Imagine Showcase. We have a lot of really talented people here, and I'm extremely excited to hear their work. If you guys don't know me, my name's James Year. I'm a second-year MFA student, and this semester I got to teach Intro to Creative Writing, CWL 202, which has been like one of the coolest experiences ever. You guys may have seen me, if you don't know my name, walking around campus with my red Southampton Creative Writing coffee cup, because I'm just like absolutely addicted to caffeine, like most of us. So, like I said, we have a lot of really talented people in this department. I've seen it firsthand with my intro class. Watching all of you guys come up with these ideas and being like, oh, this idea might be a little too weird, might be a little too crazy, I don't know. Watching those ideas turn into pieces. And then watching those pieces turn into, rough drafts, first drafts, final drafts, is incredible. So I know that we're about to get some really incredible content from these guys right here. So the way we're going to do this, really simple, just like the last Imagine event. We'll go down our little batting order here. I'll introduce who's about to read. They will approach the stage to thundering applause. They'll read to you. They will depart the stage to more thundering applause. And I'll come up and I'll introduce the next person. So really simple. Enjoy your pizza. Enjoy your soda. Our first reader had a extremely tight schedule and still fit this in, which is very cool. Kane Tripodi. He is a sophomore creative writing major and theater minor. A fun fact about Cade is that he owns an ungodly amount of Squishmallows, which I don't know what that is, to the point where they fill up 2 whole couches. Kane, everybody.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me? That's great. Amazing. So this is just an excerpt from one of my short stories that I've worked on since my freshman year. Once the clock struck 7, the vessel Nathaniel Matosky would refer to as his body rose, whether he would have liked it to or not. He felt as if he was at the sun's beck and call, only arising when the star tired of its job. Nathaniel was unsure of how good a replacement he was. A frail old man who should have been laid to rest decades ago was hardly as radiant. Though, from what he'd heard on the radio, it seemed the son and he had one thing in common. With longevity, both had the ability to reap destruction. When night fell, he sat alone in the drawing room, healthy and alive, and wondered why he was not content. In the absence of blood, all that flowed through him was shame, a crude reality that he was in the wrong story. Nathaniel Matosky was supposed to be a tragic hero, lost in a battle he could not overcome. He had accepted the fact that his parents would perish before him, but he did not sign up for the rest of his loved ones to fall as well. How was it that he remained young and healthy when the men he called his friends and lovers could not make it past their 20s and 30s? Nathaniel kept their pictures on his mantle, afraid their faces would fade from his memory otherwise. Stephen Newski was the first one to go. He was Polish like Nathaniel, the only difference between the two men being one of religion. They lived in the same community, but while the Mastoskys went to temple on Saturday afternoons, Steve and his family went to Sunday morning mass. It wasn't until their college years that they'd officially met, out and away from their families. There was a shared connection between them, growing up in a small community that would shun them if they knew of their degeneracy. The two eventually began living together, and it was on that morning where they were welcomed by Alan Willis and Leo Parker, the couple from next door. When Steve fell sick, it was they who brought him to the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, they would all walk out branded by a disease that didn't even have a name. Nathaniel recalled the sleepless nights taking care of his lover as he slowly wasted away into nothingness. Each day was a countdown for both men, wherein Nathaniel would question when it would be his turn. On October 19, 1982, it was a day that continued to live on in his memory. The second to go was Leo in 1983, soon to be followed by his partner Alan in 1984. Jimmy Shainin was 1985, Victor Silva 86. Instead of a birthday present each year, Nathaniel received another young man's ashes in a box. Was it wrong of his younger self to be glad that he'd managed to make it farther than everyone else? Nathaniel's affliction became both his saving grace and his punishment. He received all his companions ever dreamed of, another chance at life. But instead of taking advantage of that opportunity, all he had done during his 30 extended years was retreat from the world into his own inner torment. Nathaniel questioned whether it would be better were he to walk into the daylight, but all he could hear were the voices from the men on the mantle, mocking him for wanting to take the easy way out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cade. That was awesome. Our second reader is Jillian Carson. Jillian is a junior creative writing and literature student, and she loves to read and write children's literature and is the poetry editor of Stony Brook University's undergraduate literary magazine, The Sandpiper Review. Jillian.
Hi. So today I will be reading an excerpt from a middle grade novel that I've been working on. Chapter 1. Eve O'Nettle's running list of potential failures and fiascos. 1. Tripping on the excessive steps leading up to the manor. 2. Tripping on an exposed tree root. 3. Tripping on anything, really. This place is a death trap. 11-year-old Eve stood at the base of the manor steps, trying her best not to pass out. She'd heard that putting your head between your knees helped to steady yourself when feeling faint. But when she tried this, she just about rolled back down the hill she had climbed up. There weren't hills like this in the city. In the city, she took an elevator up to the apartment where she and her mom had lived on the 4th floor, and the most she climbed were the stairs from the subway to the street. Eve held the stitch in her side and breathed heavily as her mom and their tour guide, Shayna, appeared next to her. "Here we are," Shayna chirped. She had practically bounced up the hill and showed no sign of being the slightest bit winded. "The manor house. Welcome home." Home. Eve straightened, her breath returning to normal. The manor house loomed large over the front lawn, casting a murky oblong shadow that projected the peaks and corners of the structure onto the otherwise flawlessly green grass. 2 gargoyles stood guard on either side of the long stretch of steps leading up to the front deck. They appeared to be mermaid-lion hybrids with scaly tails, broad paws, and sea breeze-swept manes. Their unblinking eyes fixed Eve with a steady, stone-cold stare. They couldn't help it, Eve supposed. After all, they were made of stone. But their heavy gazes made her uneasy nonetheless. Elaborate stone finials topped the railing posts that bordered the steps, infantile angels with round bellies and plump cheeks, and various animals bowing nobly. Dense masses of ivy clung to the red brick of the manor, crawling toward the windows on the top floor. Shrubbery expertly sheared into perfect spheres choked the manor's perimeter. Eve thought she saw a figure watching them from the balcony on the 3rd floor, no more than a dark outline against the blinding sun, but when she squinted to try to get a better look, the figure disappeared into the manor. Eve shivered despite the droplets of sweat forming above her lip in the Long Island July heat. The manor looked cold, unwelcoming. It was the furthest thing from home, and yet here she was, standing before it with 2 suitcases of belongings and a full U-Haul in the driveway. Eve's mom placed a hand on her shoulder and beamed beside her. "Oh, it's wonderful. Isn't it just wonderful, Eve?" Eve tugged the corners of her mouth upward into a tight-lipped smile and nodded. Shayna squealed, her eyes wide and jubilant, and her hands clasped together at her chest in delight. She looked like she might just burst into rainbow confetti if someone as much as whispered one more compliment about the manor. Eve wondered if she had been a realtor in a past life, or a cheerleader, or a realtor cheerleader. "I knew you'd love it. Wait until you see inside. Canopy beds in every bedroom, murals on the ceilings, grand pianos." Shayna mused with a dreamy sigh. "The Cedar Smoke estate truly feels like a whole other world." She's right, Eve thought. The manor, the grounds, it all seemed to be a world away from their apartment in Lower Manhattan. She already missed their postage stamp balcony of concrete. She missed the perpetual tide of traffic beneath her bedroom window, punctuated with flashing lights and sirens and the deafening roar of cars that had misplaced their mufflers. She missed their front door that would stick to its frame in the heat, the door on which they found the help wanted flyer advertising the position for groundskeeper at Cedar Smoke Arboretum on Long Island. After years of working at hole-in-the-wall flower shops, enduring customers demanding to return potted plants withered from their own neglect, Eve's mom's dream job had literally come knocking at her door. She was hired over the phone, bringing to the table a degree in horticulture and a low salary requirement. Within a week, their apartment held nothing but cardboard boxes bloated with their belongings. Eve and her mom shipped themselves off to the suburbs to live on the Cedar Smoke estate in a manor that belonged to a dead guy with the rest of the staff of complete and total strangers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jillian. That was awesome. Our third reader is Keika Berger. Keika is a senior psychology major with a creative writing minor. She is currently in the 5-year master's program for an MBA in healthcare management. She loves to sing, and she is president of the SBU Pipettes, which is one of the a cappella groups on campus, so very multi-talented. Keika.
Hi guys. Today I'm going to be reading a short piece of nonfiction entitled June 15th. It was a habit for me to peek through her bedroom window as I pulled into my driveway next door. She had those color-changing LED lights in her room. Most nights they were blue, sometimes yellow. Other nights they weren't on, mostly on the weekends when she was out with her friends. The first night after the accident, I could hear her mom crying outside. My parents wandered up and down the hallways. I stared out my window. The lights in her room were off. I blinked and waited for the curtains to glow their usual blue, but it didn't happen. The next morning, her dad walked up our driveway, shoulders sagging, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. He opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a sob. He cried into my father's shirt for what felt like forever. My parents cried with him. I watched him leave from my bedroom window, trying and failing to keep the tears from rolling down my cheeks. Every night that week, I stared at her bedroom window when I got home. I told myself she was just out with her friends. I could hear her mom sobbing through our closed windows. 2,000 people showed up to her wake. People waited for 7 hours. The line snaked and coiled around the inside of the building, folded in on itself in the parking lot decorated with sunflowers, and went out and around the entire block. We only had to wait for 5. When her dad saw us, he embraced my father. "I can't believe you waited," he said. "I can't believe it. I 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 can't." The second week, I begged myself not to look at their house, but every morning my head turns toward their front yard, her grinning face taunting me from the "Congrats grad, class of 2022" lawn sign. Every night, I tried not to look at her bedroom window. Every night, it was dark. Her mom's sobs turned into screams, raw, blood-curdling screams at all hours of the day. It didn't matter if their windows were closed. It didn't matter if our windows were closed. Her mom was screaming bloody murder, and what could anybody do? By the third week, the pink flowers lining her front walkway had all been replaced with yellow ones. Their bay window was decorated with sunflowers and yellow bouquets, her favorite color. Her mom's screams were accompanied by the smashing and thudding of furniture inside their house. I played music to drown it out. Her parents stopped using the front door. They hardly left their house, but when they did, they went out the back. Every morning, they sat in silence and drank coffee in their backyard, staring off into the trees. By week 4, I woke up every morning hoping it was all a bad dream, hoping she would knock on our door with a huge smile and a crumb cake they had bought at some farmer's stand hours away. That didn't happen. The screaming stopped. Every day I stared at her face on a graduation sign. Part of me wanted them to take it down. She would not be graduating. Part of me hoped they would never take it down. I didn't want to forget what she looked like. By week 5, her dad, who had a full head of black hair a month before, now had hair completely white. Her mom had been whittled down to skin and bone. Her usually bright outfits of yellows and pinks and purples and blues were replaced with black. People left groceries on their front stoop. The flowers in their front window changed regularly, but the yellow flowers running up their previously meticulously kept walkway became overgrown with weeds. A month and a half passed, and I still couldn't tear my eyes away from her bedroom window. I knew it would be dark. I knew it would hurt. I couldn't help but look. Seeing her smile frozen in time and her cap and gown knocked the air out of me. A month later, they finally took down her graduation sign. Her bedroom window is dark every night. The yellow flowers in their front yard are still overgrown. The chain link fence across town that was wrecked by her boyfriend's overturned convertible is back up. There are no flowers for her there, no memorial, like the accident never happened. But the whole town is covered in yellow. Every tree, telephone pole, and mailbox is adorned with yellow ribbons. Thank you.
That was excellent. Our next reader is Rachel Alexander. Rachel is a sophomore studying globalization and international relations with minors in both creative writing and political science. A fun fact about Rachel is that she has a sassy, long-haired dachshund named Luna, and that she spent her summer exploring Europe while researching with the United Nations. Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I'm reading a short story that I recently wrote, just beginning, called Hush. The duality of a scandal is chilling. The thing about them is some scandals become all people talk about, and no matter how hard you try to get them to stop talking, no matter what lengths you reach to chop off the head, people keep talking. Two heads sprout from whence there was one, and those heads chatter like women in the parish house. In this family, chill seeps in when scandals do the opposite. When a scandal is so salacious, not a single person will utter a peep. We never saw our grandmother on Sundays. Grandmother, though we never once called her that, vaulted herself in the tool shed turned prayer house on the Lord's days. Unlike the town, which had numerous names for our grandmother, numerous, to my sister and me, she had only one, Bertie. The first day of every week, Bertie was in the prayer house before we woke, and still there well after we fell asleep. Though we unofficially christened it the prayer house, Bertie did not so much pray there as she used the time to yell at God. Especially in the hotter months, when the windows were all opened, our frail house was soundtracked by the creak of the floorboards and the gale of Bertie screaming herself hoarse in the prayer house. When Ashton and I were young, about my age 7 to her 5, after the Sunday moon had risen and the Saturday window curtains had been long closed, the two of us snuck out of bed and hid in the pantry, aiming to catch the elusive praying Bertie. The drafty wood walls of the pantry amplified the clamor of the crickets' chirps, but still, it wasn't louder than the blood pounding through our ears. Excitement, exhilaration, scouting. I liken the thrill of that to waiting to catch Santa Claus, if Santa spat tobacco, sang gospel, and threw full rolls of duct tape at people who she claimed had no sense. You can't fix stupid, but you sure as heck can shut it up. Bertie was the one to catch us. She yanked us by the ears and whooped us with the soup ladle. I'll beat your fears for jacking into my time with the Trinity. You won't be able to leave your beds. May Jesus bless you. Bertie's beatings were always a diluted reality of the threat, but we knew when she called upon Jesus that we were to never repeat our error again. Jesus. Of us three, he seemed to be Bertie's favorite child. You'd think he really was hers walking into our house, given how ever-present he was in the space. His portrait was the first to greet you when you walked in the front door. He was, in some shape or form, present on every piece of china, and Bertie only bought the milk cartons that had his face printed on the sides. On the mantel of the fireplace that we used for cooking, our stove had been broken since the arrival of Christ, it seemed, and saw no plans to be fixed, sat, each in plain wooden frames, me, Ashton, and Jesus. A quaint little mixed family. A black Ashton in a white dress with her hair in twists, a darker black me, wearing my school uniform and a closed-mouthed smile. I had lost my left front tooth a week prior, and Bertie told me to keep my gabber closed lest I look like the haggards living on 7th Street. And white Jesus, draped in white gowns and backlit by the heavens. Bertie loved Jesus with her whole heart. She'd force herself into any conversation where she'd overheard his name, as if the word was a summons. Once at the grocery store, Bertie had overheard a trio say the word prayer, and she leapt towards them. When context revealed they were not talking about the sun, as they were in fact Buddhist, Bertie's face puckered like they had just spouted blasphemy, and with her right hand, sporting all 7 wedding rings, one for every sin, smacked each of the men across the face. She then grabbed the fresh cabbage out of one of the men's hands, claiming they had no need for fresh green like that, shoved some Jesus milk into the hands of another, and walked off with Ashton and me scurrying behind. I think the first time my mother left was when I was in preschool. She had dropped me off after buying me a greasy hash brown from Rick's, kissed me on the forehead, and left. It must have been a few months into the school year, around winter, because I had been swaddled almost to choking by my puffer coat, and the sky was dark and starry when school let out. Rick picked me up that evening in a truck with Rick's Diner hand-painted on the side, and overall seemed to be more rust than metal. Where's my mommy? I'd never wondered that before, but the teachers all spoke her name in hushed tones, and I got curious. She's out pretending. His voice, being much deeper than I'd anticipated, had startled me. Pretending? Pretending she ain't got kids. His laugh wasn't pleasant. It cracked and wheezed, and his tongue flapped out of his mouth as he talked, like a rabid dog. Heck, if I had an ass like that could get me crap for free, I'd be shaking mine too. He howled at that, then fell into a fit of coughs, punctuating the scene with the hawk of a loogie out the window. But the window was closed, and his drool dribbled down the glass like thick rain. Later, I asked Bertie why her mother was rarely home. Is it because she has an ass that can get crap for free? I hadn't known that ass was a cussing word, but I learned mighty quick. Bertie took the hot comb she had on to fix her hair and beat me with it. I was freckled with welts and bruises. I didn't go to school the next day. We never spoke of my father. Neighbors didn't speak of him, Bertie didn't speak of him. Our mother, on the regularly unplanned occasion she came crashing in, didn't speak of him. I didn't know why, and I didn't know his name either. The line for her father's name was blank on my birth certificate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was awesome. Our next reader is Brian Lynch. Brian is a junior at Stony Brook, and a fun fact about him is that his mother is a librarian. Brian, stage is yours.
Hello. I'm going to be reading a piece I wrote this semester. It's gotten a lot of help from some people who are actually in this room, so shout out to them. And it's called Something Like That Springsteen Song. My best friend once told me he likes girls who drive real fast. He centered this attraction around his personal history with car wrecks and their role as an aphrodisiac. He claimed to have been involved in 3 crashes since receiving his learner's permit, said he was laid in the hospital each time after, and I was beginning to wonder if above-average hand-eye coordination and the proper use of turn signals were somehow working to keep my virginity intact. It was December 31st in 2005 when Matt Toohey first mentioned his peculiar preference, and we were passengers in his girlfriend's dad's red Mercedes convertible as she swung through dense mid-morning traffic on the Garden State Parkway, switching lanes whenever possible and heading south for Atlantic City. Allie Kennedy sat very close to the steering wheel while she drove. She didn't ask for directions, and she had placed her second cousin in the backseat beside me with whispered instructions about playing nice. Sarah Collins was, to speak plainly, a girl who smiled while humming with the radio. She had been a late addition to our holiday, invited as a last-minute attempt at balancing the numbers, and it was obvious from our initial introduction that neither one of us was particularly thrilled by that arrangement. The first thing she said to me was, "Do you know if the pool here is saltwater? I find that all good hotels have saltwater pools. It's the quickest way to tell if they're worth the price." I had limited knowledge regarding the amenities, and I expressed this in fewer words, and that was the extent of our conversation. I was left to stare out the window through miles of unidentifiable asphalt, counting the passing exit signs, developing grand schemes for a new year, and wrestling with the slightly troubling notion that I was in love with the girl in the driver's seat. We arrived at the Oceans Casino Resort at noon. The valet asked after our keys, and a bellhop collected our bags, pointed in the directions of revolving doors for that great glass building. Allie walked before us all into an open lobby. Her entrance was a light echo on the marble floor, her blonde hair was cut in a bob, and there was a coat of chinchilla fur folded over her left forearm. The receptionist greeting us from behind the front desk was short and bald, without a wrinkle on his suit, and he asked for the name of our reservation, and Allie said, "I would try Kennedy." The receptionist tapped on his keyboard. "I have you staying in a suite on the 4th floor. Does that sound correct?" "I was actually wondering who I should speak to about an upgrade," Allie said. "I'd very much like to be very high off the ground." The receptionist turned back to his computer. He pushed thick glasses up the bridge of his nose and said, "There's a deluxe available on the 36th. That's the top of our building, and it raises your price by $450 for the night. I'll just need some form of identification before I charge the card on file. Would you happen to be Linda?" "That's my mother," Allie said. "She did the booking for me as an early birthday present." Hotel policy requires authorization from the registered card holder when making any adjustments to the bill, the receptionist said. "We're quite strict on this issue." Allie's face fell by a fraction, and only for an instant, and she said, "I'm afraid she's out of country at the moment, and I'm not sure you'll be able to reach her." The receptionist ticked his head side to side and glanced down at his screen, looked back to the girl with wide eyes leaning very far over his desk. To be clear, there was much more to Allie Kennedy outside of sleek yellow hair and the ability to operate a motor vehicle moving several notches above the speed limit. She hadn't really read a book since Miss Monroe's 11th grade English, and she'd never once voted in the presidential election, and her father had founded a popular chain of bakeries stretching across Connecticut's southern coastline. These qualities folded together to create a girl who was 19, had been considered pretty for every hour of every day of her life, and made spoiled in the most charming way possible. It was rare for any man to refuse her request, and she employed a rather dirty trick when they did. She'd wrinkle her nose and bat her eyes, tilt her forehead towards the subject, and their guard would drop. At this distance, any exchange becomes intimate. The only reason to be that close to somebody is to tell them you're in love. And in that crowded hotel lobby, the receptionist turned victim. His brow broke out in sweat, and he swallowed twice and said, "I believe there was some mention of you being Miss Kennedy's daughter." "Her one and only," Allie said. "We even have the exact same nose."
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Our next reader is Grace Wong. Grace is neither a creative writing major nor a creative writing minor, but a sixth-year biology and anthropology major. She was on the road to physical therapy school before her cardiologist sat her down and told her she was ill. It was at that point she decided she'd rather be sick and happy than sick and in STEM. Sorry, STEM kids, stay strong. Grace.
Hi everyone, my name's Grace, and today I'm going to be reading a piece named The Sun That Only Sets Once. That day, my delicate summer season skimmed the edge of my mother's orange-red autumn. Our shadows burned a dark scorch onto the cool grass underfoot, marked by the hot eye of the sun. Heat and humidity kissing gossamer on my sweat-slick skin, weighed with heavy denim jeans and a long-sleeve shirt during a family picnic. I was not yet past my Ama's hip when she first got down onto her knees to look me in the eyes. She clasped her palms on either side of my arms, pinning me still, folding my body between her plea of an embrace. "Remember, precious pearl, too much skin not good. Boys will invite themselves to you. You become free meal." I remember looking down at my dress, pinching the embroidered pink cosmos on the hem just grazing my knees. I remember thinking then, "Silly Ama, there is no food here." But I nodded along, because her eyes were stern and wet, and that is what little girls do when their mothers look at them that way. I've remembered this always. I remembered this at the picnic, sprawled on the cool grass in the mid-heat of August. The sun fanned a furnace of my dark hair and pale skin, the hum of cicadas muted by the staleness of the air when I rolled up my pant legs, skin like sin burnt by the breeze, cooling my body to the point of shame. To be free is to be devoured, first by yourself and then by others. My aunt called to me from the table lined with sandwiches and chicken fingers. "Sweetie, you're looking a little hot in that." At my aunt's voice, I stopped shifting my sleeve up and down my forearms. Her eyes were obscured by large purple sunglasses, but her eyebrows were perched high on her face, spelling dubiety. "If you want something lighter, your cousin's old sundress is back in the house." I nodded, but even then, she hadn't looked away like I thought she would. The sun was beginning to taper into dusk. I didn't need it, but under her gaze, I felt consumed. The first day I had come back from preschool, my Ama had checked that I still had my water bottle, my crayon box, and the slip of paper she tucked between the waistband of my cartoon character printed underwear and skin. "No one touched here?" She gestured to my lower torso and body, eyes scanning my face like a searchlight in the ocean, rummaging in the dark for a survivor. "No, Mommy," I said. "Nobody." I was young when I first started having nightmares. It was always a memory from when I was in the living room of our old house, sitting in Ama's lap. I had just finished my lunch and dinner for the day. A can of Chef Boyardee slid into a bowl, still room temperature in the middle. When she spoke, it was quiet even with the television playing on the lowest volume. Combing her fingers through my tousled hair, she said, "I can forgive your Abba because of love. My precious pearl, my daughter, choose who you love carefully." I turned from the picnic and ran back towards the house, breaking free of my aunt's gaze. I grapple for stability in the porcelain well of a dish when I become aware my body is a danger to me. Amma, you were afraid for me because you were being hunted in your own home. I feel swallowed either way. Where do the bones of our reservations lie? In the sundress my aunt had suggested was crumpled and draped over the armrest of a plush chair in the den, as if worn, then discarded in a hurry. It was simple, blue as a summer sky. I noticed a small orange stain by the collar, but picked it up and pulled it on anyway. I stretched my arms taut over my shoulders, spine curving with the movement, then pulled the cold silver zipper up my back, feeling the low hum move up my body. I looked out the window. The sky was dark, sun tucked into a cranny between two rocky hills. Amma, how long were you free before you turned into a meal? As you warned me of wolves and sharp teeth, you were already sitting in the belly of the beast. When I step outside, the chill turns my summer into an early autumn. My skin prickles. It is cold, and I draw my hands over the exposed skin of my arms, shivering. My amma catches my gaze and looks down to my body, my skin, an invitation and a free meal. Roadkill cannot speak to warn others. It can only lie there and hope that its body is enough to slow cars before another impact. She looks away. Nothing needs to be said for me to understand I have betrayed her. What can I do, Amma? We will be hungry and hunted for as long as we are alive.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was awesome. Our next reader is Jacqueline Fragano. Jackie is in her junior year in the creative writing and journalism programs. She is a feminist with an addiction to cinnamon lattes, and she also obsesses over her cat, sunflowers, and Lin-Manuel Miranda in that order. Jackie.
To be fair, everyone should be obsessed with him. He's amazing. Okay. So I'm going to be reading a couple of poems from a collection of works that I've been doing on the side. Saturated. Response to Titian's Crucifixion. Jesus. I stare uncomfortably at his hangman's corpse. The deep brown, a coffin of mud. The ruddy red, the blood of Christ. The betrayal of Judas. I have felt a betrayal, shrouded in white and shielded in robes. I have felt betrayal drowning in blood, his blood, my blood. Jesus, I have felt the betrayal of lies and promises of hell, where I'm told your eyes will never reach me. If I don't pray before every meal, or before I go to bed, or if mom is in the hospital again. If I don't hate my fellow souls in different bodies, in different skins, in different hearts. If I don't believe because your words have been changed and interpreted and twisted, in every language, in every mind, in every voice. Can you blame me, my Jesus, that in your absence I have chosen to worship the trees, the sky, the soil, all providing an innocence that I once believed was God? Your followers would question my faith when, in your absence, they touch what is not theirs, they trod on what is sacred, and claim it is done out of love or protection and is sanctioned by faith, the true faith, the one faith. Blue-veiled Mary wouldn't dare speak, but I know. She would scream with me into that primitive void. Your mother would weep with me, echoing the pain we have felt, saturated in the blood of our wombs and our children and our sorrow. I look to you, wilted on the cross, worshipped shepherd, to end the crucifixion. We are but tiny creatures, drunk on poisoned wine, devouring your thin wafer body with the power to destroy everything, and yet man is not God. And the second one, the dreamer. Maladaptive daydreaming is a disorder. Symptoms include, but are not limited to, vivid daydreams, lack of sleep, and the struggle to complete activities. Maladaptive daydreaming is a disorder. It may last for minutes or hours and hours and hours and hours. I know a maladaptive daydreamer. It is a trauma response passed from a bullied schoolgirl to the woman she became when she found the waking world wasn't what she dreamed it would be. It will get better, but sometimes she is saved by a secret weapon, a safe haven, a labyrinth, a place that embraces her with calm, constricting arms, like a weighted quilt in a patchwork of stories that tangles around the limbs, a place to guard her in her most vulnerable of moments. On the frail fringes of the mind, it waits, like a fettered Cerberus that barks, but never bites. A guardian that breaks as easily as a lake's first brittle frost of winter, crumbling at the crack of a clock bell's ring to reality or the booming of a boisterous voice. Maladaptive daydreaming is a disorder. It is a disassembling of order. It is the demolition of a child's block tower. It is the creation of cities and coasts and countries and continents. It is the birthing of lovers and losers and heroes and gods. It is the exploration of aspiration and contrition and revolution and anguish. I am a maladaptive daydreamer, and I hide in the vivid and continuous dream.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Our next reader is Jonathan Hernandez. Jonathan is a junior year undergraduate writer with a specialization in postmodernist dark fantasy, working towards his bachelor's in the creative writing department. He's been working on his first novel series since he was 12 and is currently in the market to be published this winter as he finishes up a few planned short stories. Jonathan.
Howdy, howdy. I have never spoken into a microphone before. Alrighty. I'll be reading the introduction to my thesis, The Layers of Livendell. O longing, I was born on King's Day, or the day of choice. There was celebration, endless cheers and jeers, and drinking and joy. The king had chosen my mother to be his bear, my father to raise his holy seed. It was like this throughout all the layers, each of the triads showing their own ways of worship towards the king, and their choices were also born. 3 layers, 3 choices, a duke born from each, praises be. Praises be. The life of a duke is perceived as beholden. They are raised in the finest courts of their respective layers, and beneath the signed veil the king birthed as our sky, they are seen by all as holy. The king chose them, after all. Their families bore his benevolence. Just as his white heart beats within each loyalty of Livendell, his will manifests itself physical through the triad of dukes. They are his vessels, they are his choices. But there is the graying. When born in Livendell, within the king's arms, the children all bear his white eyes. All loyalties do. Every man and woman carries the gift of his eyes as they do his heart. Such praises are our connection to him, our undeniable proof of his will and his reign. There is no denying the king. If you've any doubt, just put your hand over your chest and listen. Beside your own, you will feel his second beat. The graying would change that. Far above Livendell, between the twinkling twilight stars and hiding amongst the silver seafoam clouds, there exists holes. Holes poked through by the beyond, holes bled through by the deep. The graying occurs when a child is born beneath such tears, when a child is given beneath a black star. They are called gray-spoken. Their ears are undeafened to the deep, and their eyes, forever gray, beckons them to wander. A gray-spoken child is often a damned child. The light of the king vacates their eyes, and their chest beats with only one rhythm. Most families abandon them in fear of a bad omen, a blasphemy against the king they fear, and some do not even grant them that kindness and kill the child outright. Return them to the deep, for it is better to give sacrifice to a second god than risk the spread of a gray-spoken's nature to wander. The Logic, an anthology written by the Pale Prophets as his holy word, states the following. To kill in place of wandering is to live in place of damnation. For to be lost is an unchoiced eternity, but those who stain themselves red may still yet be saved. The king's robes are unstainable as they are grand, infinite as he is forgiving. Raised within hands shaking of true repentance, the king would allow you to use his tatters as your washcloth, and by doing so, his 6 eyes would brim with pride. The fear of becoming lost is a terrifying threat that looms in the back of everyone's mind. It is a thing that can happen at any moment, some whisper, passing the words to and fro as they tug along thistles in their vineyards and weeds from their gardens. It's a temptation you can't shake, a tugging in your chest towards the beyond, a beckoning. I've heard some gray-spoken can even hear a voice. 3 monuments have been raised due to the wanderings, the monuments of mourning, Aryi, Thalys, and Priam. The three court soldiers represent the lost men who gave themselves to the deep in hopes of recovering those who'd wandered on the day of the march, when the wanderings first began. Beneath their feet, inscribed into golden plaques, read the names of up to 700,000 men, women, and children. As a duke reigning during such times, I had a duty to the families of the outer layer to take all those lost names to memory. It took me 13 days after to find my father. To become lost is to simply cease to be, and many believe that deprivation to be the ultimate outcome of those who have wandered. Ain't nothing out there but nothing. I looked about as far as I could. Beyond them walls and trees are just trees. Sir, I ain't even seen footprints. They just become ghosts. Say, can you hear them? I believe I'm alone in my thinking that life persists after wandering. But if I were to ever confess such a thing, I'd surely be stripped bare and forced to repent. The title of Duke can only protect me from so much. To reject the truth of the Pale is to reject the logic, and the logic is to spit in the 6 eyes of the king himself if rejected. An image so unthinkable, most loyalties would sooner end their own lives than allow their minds to envision it. But I was born with eyes dimmer than worn pearls, and inside my chest I have only myself for company. My thoughts cannot be known by the king, for he has never seen the lands beneath my eyes. He is not connected to me, nor I to him. The Pale cannot accuse me. The loyalties cannot suspect me. Though I give the king my love for bringing me my life and thought, I will use both gifts and to give my devotion elsewhere. The truth. I write this to you in faith. I will find my truth, and as I live, I will ask the king myself of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our next reader is supposed to be Tamia Nicholas. I don't know if she was able to... Tamia, then you're up. You are our penultimate reader. Just an excuse to use the word penultimate. So the stage is yours. Actually, I can read your bio real quick. Tamia is in her second year studying mass communications. She has a passion for reading and writing since she was little, and she loves sharing her work to help uplift others and put smiles on people's faces. The stage is yours.
Hi, I'm going to be reading a collection of poems. This first one is called There and Gone Alone. She used to think that to be alive and to enjoy the feeling of being high off of life was to be surrounded by others who poured in sunshine rays of light, to be touched by outer affection and laughs and smiles that could keep her going on, riding the waves of gratification and praise for miles. As time went on, from her, a new revelation and desire was born. To be constantly attempting to keep up with the Joneses had her working herself down to the bone, only to realize that what's deep down, others won't always care to be shown. That those around you can also dim your shine. There are some who wish to see you down and some who secretly remain close in spite, waiting on you to fall. Not everyone wishes to see you win, but would rather lead you to darkness and sin, as that is what they themselves carry within. She now craves for nothing more than to sit on the moon, feet swinging, dreaming in full swoon, of a time to be alone, learn and grow, to catch a break from all the menacing and fake, drama and disarray, despite others' dismay, to find the path of her own, and people with whom she can travel into the unknown, who will uplift and encourage her to be the best she can be, who she'll never outgrow. This second one is called Goodbye. I remember the day I realized that this might not be a forever thing, rather a temporary cling, that maybe I'd be okay with slipping away out onto the ocean, not tethered like you thought it's been, no sling, just possibly holding on by a single string, find myself not feeling appreciated, the person who gives and brings all that I have to share, to lift you up, be the wind beneath your wings, just wanted to be a decent human being. To be the best friend I could be, hoping, believing that you had something in you that I could take up as an offering. I guess I was wrong. These days, I find myself griping and gathering. Instead, my peace and my sanity, I found myself sacrificing, risking and conflicting, scrapping and scraping in a wrestling ring. Just wanted to do the right thing. Time to put me first instead of fighting. I refuse. You won't leave me standing here with nothing. Not empty, but absolving. How about an I set you free thing? And this last one is called Peace Be Still. She stepped outside with her head held up to the sun. It's been a while since she said this time she wouldn't run, and boy, does it feel good to stay put. Cemented into the earth while the gravel blows, having a foundation rooted within oneself. A peace bestowed and a growth from a cracked open pit that was slit and sliced. An exposed seed pollinated and fed. An infestation turned manifestation of liberation that cannot be shaken. You no longer have effect. You are no longer her concern, because she has learned to discern. For the peace that has found its place in her heart, she now stands guard. No window unshut, no door unlocked. Only granted entrance upon an approved firm knock. A home is not a house, but an indescribable feeling come known. Once found, she'll never let go. So with this advice, take it and store it wisely. Her sun will surely forever continue to beam. You will be dealt with kindly, but beware, this cedar tree is strong and incorruptible, a force to be reckoned with. Be mindful and proceed accordingly. Trust me.
Thank you so much, Maya. Our last reader of the day is Maria Riding. Maria is a junior studying psychology, creative writing, and marketing. She has a particular interest in abnormal psychology and understanding how moments build us into what we become. Maria.
Okay. The piece I'm reading is from a short story I'm writing called All Exits Look the Same, but don't ask me how it ends because I haven't written that part yet. Okay. All set, Ernest asked from the other side of his 1982 Cherokee. Cecily sheltered her eyes in efforts to avoid her own reflection as she peered through the tinted window. She counted each bag and gave a good nod. All right, let's go, Ernest said, grinding a cigarette butt into the gravel below him. Ernest let Cecily believe she was the navigator as they drove to Evergreen Lake. His father had a summer home down there, and sometimes Ernest would spend days on end in the cabin smoking reefers when the town got too busy. He had the route memorized, so it didn't matter when she missed turns futzing with the radio or that she had only a theoretical understanding of cardinal direction. Despite her chronic inability to adequately read a map, Cecily was quite a good passenger seat assistant. She was sure to maintain a steady flow of M&Ms into Ernest's right hand, could light his cigarette without blocking his vision, and would gladly reach into the back seat for a jolt from the water cooler without spilling ice regardless of how bumpy the mountain roads were. She learned the importance of this from her mother's never-ending list of the real reason why her father left. Of course, these were all hypotheticals, and for the most part, entirely fictitious. Cecily's 13th birthday was the first family celebration held without her father in attendance. That year, her mother upgraded to Mylar balloons, which she anchored to Hershey kiss-shaped weights in each corner of the yard. Multicolor pennant banners swooped in semicircles along the fence, though many flipped upside down, exposing their pale underbellies in the wind. Priscilla sat in a foldable outdoor high chair, grabbing fistfuls of her very first piece of chocolate cake and squishing it between her fingers. The neighbor came over to man the grill, and though it was odd to have a different man stand in her father's place, it was nice to not have to pretend to enjoy burnt hamburger buns and charred beef. Some store-bought card was sloppily taped to last month's issue of Time magazine and sat at the base of the present pile. The only thing handwritten spelled out, Dad. To this day, Cecily wished he had sent nothing at all. Baby, would you get my sunglasses? They're in my jacket, the left pocket, Ernest asked, squinting as the sun rays evaded his visor and blinded him. Of course, Cecily said, turning about face and bending over into the back seat. Digging through the baggage, Ernest haphazardly packed. You know, you didn't have to bury your jacket under a week's worth of groceries. Ernest looked over at his girlfriend, who was poured entirely over the armrest console. I like the view, he said with a smirk. As Cecily pulled his jacket from his backpack, a small felt-lined box tumbled out. Uneasy that Ernest might have overspent on this year's birthday gift, Cecily opened the box, only to be met with an heirloom engagement ring staring back at her. She recognized the cushion-cut turquoise from the left hand of Ernest's grandmother, who had recently been put to rest after a terrible case of pneumonia. You know, this probably isn't the greatest place for you if you get into a crash, which is becoming more and more likely the longer you stay like that, Ernest said, his hands fixed on 10 and 2 but his eyes drifting off the road. Cecily lowered the lid slowly, attempting to muffle the signature snap that comes with the closing of a jewelry box against her thumb. She tucked the box back into Ernest's backpack, burrowing it under a spare change of striped tube socks. Sorry, you really did a good job of hiding it away, Cecily said, as she flipped upright into her seat. She cautiously pat down the jacket until she felt the bulk of Ernest's glasses through the corduroy fabric. Cecily retrieved the shades, pinching them by their left temple tip for easy donning as she offered them to Ernest. The barbed-wired fence that ran along the side of the road was softened by the speed at which it was witnessed. Behind the blurry overlay of galvanized steel was a sunflower field. The outermost stalks were mangled and crushed against the fencing, and the occasional capitulum was pierced by spikes in the wiring. The scene was disheartening, as Cecily never thought flower farming could look so unromantic. She wondered why someone would fortify this counterfeit meadow with such high security. She imagined there must be a reason. Perhaps the owner was a paranoid schizophrenic, tired that admirers driving past would steal his flowers instead of spending the $3 necessary to purchase a bouquet. Though, if she were listening, Cecily would have heard Ernest explain the local lore behind the field and the controversial hemp farm hidden in the center. As a child, Cecily spent most afternoons tucked away in vacant booths at her father's 24-hour diner. She kept herself entertained by picking at the table laminate or ripping at foam that burst through the tears in the upholstery. Her father, Richard, would lecture her about homework, but residual drops of fake maple syrup made the table far too sticky for paper and pencil. As she got older, her eyes became glued to the clock that began to tick backwards if she watched for too long. Cecily would often slink away to make paperclip change in the managerial office. This is where she discovered a pair of adult small leopard print leggings slumped against the back panel of her father's desk. When Cecily's mother confronted him with the attire, Richard dismissed any concerns by suggesting that the leggings must be her own, to which Pamela informed her husband that she was, in fact, still 8 months pregnant and not so delusional as to think she would magically drop 4 dress sizes after the birth of her second child. Richard then explained it must be Cecily's. However, when Pamela held the leggings up to her daughter, the garment draped from the girl's sternum and dusted the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And that is going to do it for our lineup today. Thank you guys for being such an awesome audience. Can we do another giant round of applause for these guys? There might be pizza left. I'm not sure. If there is, go for it. I wish all of you guys a lot of luck in finals week and an awesome winter break. Thank you so much for coming, guys.